Hi friends, and welcome back to the Meditative Aiden YouTube channel, where we talk about mindfulness and how mindfulness can help you work through the challenges and experiences of everyday life. My name is Aiden, and today we're going to be talking about where mindfulness actually comes from. So in today's video, we're going to cover, the original definition, where its roots are. We're going to cover how that was applied at the time, and then we're going to talk about an Indian mythology that kind of lends some understanding to how it arose. I want you to know that as I have gone on a personal journey to understand where mindfulness came from, it's helped me deepen my experience as I've come closer to its roots, to understanding, where it started and why it started. So the thing about mindfulness is that we have to dig back into the ancient Buddhist traditions all the way back to the era when the Buddha lived, right around 500 BCE to 300 BCE, or somewhere right around there. The thing is that the Buddha never actually wrote down or had anyone write down what he was teaching at the time. Buddhism was carried on as an oral tradition in ancient India, where the Buddha lived and was raised and taught. It lived in that area as an oral tradition, from ear to ear, from generation to generation. It was 300 years after the Buddha died when everything he taught was finally written down in the Pali Canon. It's a massive set of books that's like almost 3,600 pages. It includes everything that he taught in the language of the day, which was Pali. And in this language, we find the word sati, which is what the Buddha referred to and where we draw our definition of mindfulness from. So the Buddha used the word sati a lot. I mean, it is littered throughout the Pali Canon all over the place. But when he says that we need to remember something, what is it that we're remembering? So when the Buddha was teaching his students the practices and traditions of Buddhism, he would say that when you're sitting in meditation and you become distracted, to remember to bring your awareness from that distraction into the present moment. In addition, he also said that when those distractions and those thoughts and those sensations occur, to remember that sensation or thought, to take a mental note of it, and recognize that it's there, to then bring your awareness back into the present moment. And the function of this is to help you remember when those experiences are arising so that you know how to bring your attention back into your body and into the present moment. Buddhism is also really well known for one of the Buddha's major theses, which was that life is suffering, and suffering comes from clinging. Now, what the Buddha taught is that our clinging to different experiences, to different distractions and thoughts, are what cause suffering. And the thing is that when he teaches to remember, he's teaching us how to refrain from clinging to those things. What he would tell his students is that, if you have some expectation of reality, you need to remember to bring your concentration back to the present moment and how reality is right now. Because when we attach these expectations to reality, as he taught, we kind of build ourselves a psychological trap. We then, reality never really matches up to our expectations. So what happens is we're disappointed with life, we get frustrated, or we have different emotions or sensations and all these things. But the thing is, the Buddha didn't just say that we needed to remember to bring our awareness back into the present moment when distractions arise that are negative. He was saying for positive distractions too. And the reason that he said that is because if you cling to the sensation of happiness, you're constantly going to be chasing it. And every moment that you don't have that sensation of happiness, you're lost in the distraction away from the present moment. You're chasing happiness in the future. And what the Buddha was trying to say is appreciate the happiness when it comes. Appreciate that, sense of frustration or that distraction when it comes, but come back into the present moment. Let go of your expectations and live here and now. This isn't to say, though, that you should, stop setting goals or not have dreams or anything like that. Rather, when you set a goal or you have some kind of dream like that, don't set an expectation upon the reality of that goal or dream. So if I set a goal, like so many of us have, for New Year's resolutions, we create expectations that will follow through with them. And we all know way too well what it's like when you have that expectation and you fail to meet it. You beat yourself up, you're mean to yourself, you're not good enough, all these things, and you'll never be good enough. So when we attach these expectations and these desired outcomes When we attach ourselves to them is where suffering arises. When we set these goals, when we have these dreams, it doesn't mean that we're not supposed to let go of them. It means that embrace what it could be and not what you think it should be. So to kind of explain this, what this means is that if you have that New Year's resolution, instead of expecting yourself to meet a certain standard, you should just, be present with the goal and think about the future that could happen. Think about the way the goal could turn out. Because so often in my personal life, I found that, as I set expectations of goals and I don't meet them, I go into a negative spiral. But when you think about your goal in a way that it's more malleable, it's fluid, you're saying, I am in a relationship with this goal, and whatever happens, I'm okay with it. This goal is describing an outcome that could happen. And if that doesn't happen, that's okay, I'll just adjust. And that's one of the beauties of mindfulness, is teaching you how to remember that presence and that acceptance of the present moment. So don't shy away from setting goals and having dreams. That's not what the Buddha was saying. By all means, set those goals, have those dreams, work towards things. But when you set that expectation for it to happen, when you set that desire and attach yourself to it, you're setting yourself up for failure. So there's an Indian mythology in the Hindu tradition that also uses the word sati. When I was originally looking up and studying things, I typed in sati and saw that apparently it's an Indian tradition where a widow will throw herself onto her husband's funeral pyre to burn herself to death with her dead husband. This is a tradition that's been banned in India, and for the record, I do not condone burning yourself to death. That's very painful, and man, just don't do that. I wanted to look into this, why is it that sati can mean, to remember, but it also can mean to throw yourself on a funeral pyre in remembrance of your husband? And I found actually that there's a story behind it. There's an interesting story in this mythology about this lady, and her name is Sati. And this lady Sati is in love with the god Shiva. And Shiva is one of the big gods in Hinduism. He's up there, one of the top 3 or 4. Sati actually marries Shiva against her father's wishes. And what happens is then her father has a really prominent sacrifice in town. And, sacrifices in these days were big ordeals, big events for the gods, and big events for the townspeople as well. It was a really prominent ritual custom at the time, especially in India. So when her father neglected to invite Shiva, or actually intentionally didn't invite Shiva, what happened is she actually went and killed herself. Because it was such a disgrace. It was so horrifying that he wouldn't do that. When Shiva found out that Sati had killed herself, he went and picked up her body and carried it on a shoulder all over the world, mourning. And then at this part of the story it gets a little weird, because then the other gods saw his mourning and decided to dismember her body and scatter her parts throughout all the world so that he would stop mourning. Now, as cryptic and weird as that might sound, there's an interpretation that works into our definition and understanding of the history of mindfulness. After Sati was dismembered and spread throughout the world, she was reborn as the goddess Parvati. Parvati. I don't actually know how to pronounce her name. It's one of those, I don't want to do a disservice, but at the same time, Parvati, Parvati. That's how it's spelled. But anyways, she was born again as a goddess and was still married to Shiva, and they have one of those happily ever after stories. In fact, in a lot of current Hindu traditions, and for the longest time, Parvati has and always will be the spouse of Shiva. So during the time of the Buddha, when this was right around the era of the Buddha that this story was circulating, this mythology was circulating. And the thing is that stories in those days were really powerful tools of explaining circumstances, how to deal with situations. And furthermore, ritual sacrifice of animals or humans was a really important component of, Hinduism at the time, because it was a way of reenacting and revisualizing the experiences of the gods and creations. It was a way of paying reference and respect to them. So eventually, of course, what a lot of women started doing was throwing themselves on their husbands' funeral pyres. But why? The reason, as far as I can tell, is because these women are remembering the sacrifice and devotion of this woman to her husband Shiva. So what this name seems to have come to represent, the name Sati, is to remember, because these women were throwing themselves on these funeral pyres because they were so devoted and so in love with their husband, just as Sati was in love with Shiva. This story may not be 100% accurate, and if you know any more about this story, I would love to learn. I know that it's very complicated, and if you're not part of the tradition or haven't studied it thoroughly, you can get details wrong. Nonetheless, what I'm assuming is that this word sati came to mean to remember, so mindfulness. We've currently interpreted it to mean, a conscious awareness of the present moment. And the reason we've done that is because sati in the original language, the Pali language, meant to remember the Buddha's teachings in the way that he used it, to bring your consciousness away from distraction, to come into the present moment and remember what you've been taught so that you can free yourself from suffering. The reason we've translated it to mean an awareness of the present moment is because it kind of encapsulates the entire definition in the context of Buddhism more succinctly than anything else, because it captures that ability to remember the present moment and to remember to bring yourself away from distraction through awareness. So what we've really done in the modern era is taken this definition to remember and mixed it with the context of, bringing your awareness into the present, and put them together to say mindfulness. Aside from the Indian mythology there and the weird dismembering of sati, what sati means, this original word, is to remember. And fundamentally what we need to remember is to bring our awareness away from distractions and back into the present moment. And it's through this method that the Buddha taught you can obtain freedom from suffering. And what he means for us in the modern era is freedom from our clinging to these different objects, these different entities, whether that be clinging to the need to be happy all the time, the clinging to running from experiences or numbing from them, or otherwise. As I've come to understand this history with greater clarity, it's helped me understand a lot of the background between, where mindfulness was and where it is now. Understanding that context that the Buddha taught in and why he used the word sati and why we use the word mindfulness now has helped me understand that when I'm distracted, when I'm experiencing those things, my responsibility using my mindfulness practices is to bring my awareness back into the present moment, to live in the richness of the here and now. As the Buddha described, as I've talked about earlier, the reason for doing this is to refrain and keep yourself away from clinging to experiences and situations that cause you suffering. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video and learned something about the context of where mindfulness came from and how it came to be and where that definition comes in. I hope that understanding that context and a little bit of that history and background also deepens your practice of mindfulness and how you practice mindfulness day to day. If you liked today's video, this week's video, make sure to let me know by liking the video, giving it a big thumbs up as I, awkwardly hold my thumb next to my head, and subscribing if you're interested in learning more about mindfulness and how it can help you. You can also follow on Instagram and Facebook at Meditative Aiden, and I encourage you to go check out the blog article on this on the Meditative Aiden website. You can find it under the blog section there. In addition, you can also go listen to this on the Meditative Aiden Podcast. Otherwise, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video again, and I'll see you guys next time.